If we were to visit a classroom in 1900, it would look something like this, with the students sitting passively in desks and the teacher at the front of the room active. Sadly, 100 years on, this is what our classrooms mostly look like. We've got students sitting passively in desks and a teacher working really hard in the front of the classroom. If you were to walk through a typical high school in America, that's what it's going to look like. And I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if I could take the schedule that some of my students have, going from period to period to period, lecture to lecture to lecture. I might be interested in some of the material, but a lot of it, maybe not. And so schools have to change, but getting there is not super easy. This fall, I was lucky enough to be selected as one of 10 YouTube Adju gurus. And so I got to visit YouTube headquarters in San Bruno, California. It was very exciting. I was excited to hear how video is revolutionizing education, but the big take home for me was what an awesome place to work. The facility is amazing, the people are talented, the food is incredible, they work in groups, they work collaboratively, they're all working together in this real positive kind of environment. And so my take home was that's what schools should really look like. And my philosophy is we need to go from a passive to an active learning environment. And we need to go from an environment that's centered on the teacher and the teacher working hard to one that's centered on the student, with the student working very hard. I've already taken biology. I already understand all of this. And so I sometimes get irritated when the students want me to do all of the work. They should be the ones that are doing the work. I put together a TED Talk where I talk about how I changed my class into a video game. And what it allowed me to do was to move along this continuum from a passive, teacher-centered environment to one that's active and centered on the students. But that's not the only way we could do it. We could do it through a mastery blended learning system. We could do it through project-based learning. But I think most teachers would agree that we have to make that transition in order to keep making education relevant. It's not easy to make that change, and I fell into a lot of potholes when I tried this. The nice thing about the way a typical classroom is run is that the teacher can sit in the front of the classroom and drive the bus, and it makes sure that that bus gets from point A to point B. And when I tried this last year, what I found is that when you give your students a huge amount of freedom and let them do independent learning, some do great and race ahead, but some immediately stall out or drive into a wall. And so I had to spend more time teaching them how to learn. And that seems simple, I know, but if I could give my students one thing, it would be the ability to learn on their own, because that's something that's going to serve them for the rest of their life. The importance of biology will fade away, but the ability to learn anything is very important. And so I came up with a little poem that talks about the size of an independent learning group. And so it kind of goes like this, forgive my lack of poetry skills. 1 is for learning, private and active. 2 is for teaching, it goes both ways. 3 is for working, the job divided. 4 is for nothing but wasting the days. And so in my classroom, when the students are working on a mastery blended learning environment, the most important number is 1. If you want to learn biology, if you want to learn math, if you want to learn anything, the best number is 1. You sitting, watching a video like you're doing right now, reading a book, reading a journal article, on the internet, you by yourself, private, alone, and active, not just sitting hoping that reading the book, it'll somehow get into your brain. You have to be doing something that put that into your brain. If you think you can read a book while listening to music, you're wrong. You can't multitask. Almost all of the studies would show that when you multitask, you end up being worse at both things. And so I find a quiet place. Even today, I still go to the local library. I go to the 4th floor. I find this perfect cubicle where I can focus and I can get work done. Because if you want to learn something, you got to do it by yourself. If you want to teach something, that works best in 2s. So tutoring 1-to-1 can never be beaten. In other words, we're never going to find a system where one teacher and one student working together are going to achieve teaching. Now, I think it's important to note what teaching is. Teaching means that the students are actually learning something. And so I hear teachers constantly say, I taught chapter 2 or I taught photosynthesis and they didn't get it. That means you talked about photosynthesis and they didn't get it. Teaching implies that they learn it, and it has to go both ways. If I'm doing all the work when I'm teaching or working with individual students, I already know the material. It's important that they are asking me questions and I'm asking them questions to see where they are. I've found in laboratories that 3 is a great number. And so if you're working in groups, you can divide the jobs and you can get work done. And so in a lab, having 2 people is less effective than having 3 just because you have one more person. But that person in the middle has a tendency to not let a crazy person just take it out of control. But what I find is when I'm giving the students time to work independently, 4 is the worst number. And anything bigger than that is even worse. What does that mean? 4 is great if you're having a dinner party or if you're basically hanging out with your friends and you want to have a discussion. But if you're trying to learn, anything above 3 is really not going to help you. Now, you might say that discussion is very important, and I think you're right. In a class of 30, discussion is going to be very important. But what I found in my class is that really it only ended up being 3 or 4 kids that were answering all the questions and participating in the discussion. And so again, I think a first step to letting kids independently learn is giving them the tools so they can be successful. And I hope that's helpful.